All right. So we are on session 3, and this is the power of place with a focus on places of remembrance. And I sent you all an article, and Lisa, I just got your email about this sculpture, this anti-Semitic sculpture that she sent me an article this morning. A German Jew vows to fight on to remove anti-Semitic sculpture after court defeat. And I'm just going to share my screen really quickly so you can all just see this image. This is what the sculpture looks like.
We did hi everyone, I'm Sophie.
Sorry, this is Sophie Don in Philadelphia.
More later. But we actually, we have something called Anti-Semitism Explained, which is like a deep dive into a few things like memes and things that we see on social media. Yeah. And we have one that's about this, which I realize is not social media, but we have one about this, the Juden Cell. It's fascinating. I didn't know about it until a few months ago, but I can share the information that we found about it as well in the chat.
That would be wonderful. Yes. And this is actually the first time I've seen it as well. Thank you, Lisa, for sending. I thought that in the article that I sent, I thought that particular way of remembering, Sophie, I sent it to you too. The markings of remembrance with that single image, that single illustration. And then on the back, one of the Nuremberg laws, one of the Nuremberg racial laws that was corresponded with that image. So, Jews couldn't be out before a certain time. They couldn't frequent public beaches. They couldn't own pets, et cetera, et cetera. So read that article, look at those illustrations, and I will turn the presentation to Sophie. I'm going to introduce her, but she has, you are okay with questions at any time, right, Sophie? Okay, great. So she's actually a proud Philadelphian, and she's worked as a program coordinator, museum educator, and tour guide for many of the city's cultural institutions. She's currently the administrative and operations manager for the Philadelphia Holocaust Remembrance Foundation, which programs and maintains the Horace Wasserman Holocaust Memorial Plaza in Center City, Philadelphia, which she will be giving us a tour of today. Sophie received her MA from Brown University in the Public Humanities, exploring cultural institution structure, function, and practice. This built on her BA in history from Skidmore College, where she focused her thesis research on Holocaust education and memorialization across the United States and in Berlin. Along with her former studies, Sophie has a personal passion for the mission of the PHRF, as her grandparents and several other family members are survivors and were involved in the 1964 memorial effort, which she will tell you a bit more about during her presentation. So Sophie, thank you so much for doing this for us today. This is exciting. I'm excited. I turn it to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's lovely to e-meet or virtually meet you all. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm gonna share my screen. Let's see. I've got 2 monitors and some. Who knows where it ever comes up. Are we looking at my presentation? Yeah. Okay. Great. So hi, I'm Sophie. So I'm the administrative and operations manager for the Philadelphia Holocaust Remembrance Foundation. Thank you, Leslie, for the introduction, and thank you to Leslie and Dan and the whole Wassmuth Center crew. As always, I'm very happy to be working with you all again. So our agenda today, first I'll do a brief introduction to the plaza and the foundation and where we are in Philadelphia, for those of you that haven't been here or aren't as familiar. Then we'll get a little bit more into the history and evolution of the Memorial Plaza, because there has been big change from the original monument in 1964 to as it currently is as an outdoor classroom and museum in the last couple of years. Then I'll go into the specific features of the plaza. So that'll be kind of like our virtual tour experience, getting to see what's actually at the plaza. And those were, again, put in within the last 5 years or so to really enhance the educational use of the space. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the educational programs and public programming, so how we actually use the space, and our, I think, very interesting and I also think fairly successful, like it's been working out really well, iWalk app integration for virtual and in-person tours, which is geared both towards public use and for school groups. And then last thing, we'll have a few minutes for questions, but please do, interrupt me or do a raise hand or something if you want to talk through the presentation. I'm happy to, go off script and we can chat, but you can also save questions to the end. And also after this presentation, please get in touch if you want to talk about anything that we've talked about today. Our foundation is tiny. It's just me and my executive director. So we do everything for the foundation. So really anything that you have any questions about, whether it is the plaza or more broadly, happy to talk about. So first off, welcome to Philly. So for those of you who haven't been here, or maybe it's been a while, welcome to the Parkway. This is our Benjamin Franklin Parkway. So the Benjamin Franklin Parkway is a 2-mile thoroughfare that runs between the Philadelphia Museum of Art right here and City Hall over here. And you can see there are lots of institutions along this thoroughfare that are numbered. We're number 21 right here, though my office and where I am right this second is right here. So number 21 is the Horace Wasserman Holocaust Memorial Plaza. All the numbers do represent the prime best museums and cultural institutions in the city. Of course, there are many more elsewhere in the city, but these are some of the biggies. So that includes the Barnes Foundation, if you've heard of the Barnes Foundation, the Franklin Institute, the Philadelphia Free Library, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, as we already see. So it means we have really good foot traffic that comes by the site. And as you'll see, as we really look at the site more closely and the evolution of the site, is that between the original monument from 1964 and the Educational Memorial Plaza now is really an attempt to activate the space so that people are drawn into the plaza for reflection and learning or just general exploration. That it's not just something that people are passing by as they're walking from institution to institution or looking at the public art along this thoroughfare. So one thing to mention before we zoom in on the site, I think, is this is a super special monument because it is the first monument to the Holocaust, and that it's in Philadelphia. And of course, we know there are many survivors in other cities around the country, especially in our area. We've got New York 2 hours north, and we've got DC 2 hours south. So there are lots of survivors, and it's a very strong community along, this whole 95 corridor. But Philadelphia is one of the places that ended up having a very strong population of survivors who formed a really tight-knit community and found family amongst one another. And I personally am very happy to have been brought up in one of those families. My grandmother is still, she just lives like 20 minutes away, right outside of Philly, and she's 92 and a survivor and my absolute inspiration. So, this is very close to my heart. This job is close to my heart. The memorial, the education is all really important to me. So,
Sophie, I have a question really quick. And about that, you said this is the first Holocaust, remembrance monument. Do you mean the first in the United States?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Very cool. Yeah.
Which was 1964. And I'm going to show pictures of the actual, the creation of the monument and everything.
It's just, it's amazing. To think that it was Philadelphia that had the first one and not, a city we would think of like New York or Los Angeles or, something like that.
Definitely. And I feel like, and we can't omit the importance of Philly as a symbol of, it's symbol of freedom and democracy and equality. And of course, I mean, in 2021, especially, like, we are very much aware of the founding fathers' blind spots and all of the complications also within, what the founding fathers were doing. But we would be remiss not to note that, 250-ish years ago, the Declaration was signed, and Constitution happened 2 miles, down the road. That, all men are created equal, and, we're building the country as, we're supposed to have religious freedom and freedom of speech and all these other protections. And the survivors who petitioned for this memorial and really planned for it, did find truth in those protections when, they made their homes here, both in Philadelphia and in the United States more broadly. So the memorial, exists on the Parkway among some of the greatest cultural institutions, in the city, but also I think some of them in the country, and as an outdoor classroom and a museum, but also as a public park. I think it's a really great kind of hybrid of, it's super accessible, and there's no tickets, there's no cost associated with coming to it or using any of our resources ever. But that it's also, it is this park, but also an educational space. So I think that's really cool, in my humble opinion. So let's look at it. So in 1964, our monument, which is the monument to the 6 million Jewish martyrs, became the first public monument in the United States to honor the victims of the Holocaust. The sculpture was designed by a survivor, Nathan Rappaport. It took him 7 years, and he sculpted it in Italy. And when he first shipped it to Philadelphia, he said that he hoped that the sculpture would speak for him far into the future, which I thought there was a really nice quote that he said that his words are made of stone and bronze. They're silent but everlasting. And I thought that was just like a beautiful way to think about his work. So here we have a few pictures of the pieces and the installation. It looks really heavy. And then in 1964, we have this huge community of Holocaust survivors and their families, with a group called the Association of Jewish New Americans and a group, the Federation of Jewish Agencies of Greater Philadelphia, all presented the monument to the city around Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day in 1964. And again, what makes this particularly important for me is that somewhere in this crowd, I don't know where, but are my grandparents and great aunt and uncle, and who knows, maybe like my dad, really small. So it's very, I would love to be able to find them, but I have no idea where they are in that picture. So after opening the memorial site in 1964, at this head of the Benjamin Franklin Parkway, so we're very close to City Hall. In this picture right here, City Hall's like this way. It's like just a little bit farther up, but you can see it from the plaza, and you can also see the art museum. So it really is like a pretty great spot for foot traffic. So the park was used every year for Yom HaShoah events. So they would close off this street here and put tons and tons of chairs, and there would be speakers, and many survivors did come to it and speak at those events. Of course, that group got smaller and smaller. I think the last one that I went to, I used to go every year, and I think by 2015, it's a smaller group of survivors. It's mostly second generation folks and grandkids. But it looked like this, right? So the Parkway, this street here is right here. So you can see it's just the monument and some trees. So it wasn't really being utilized much except for that one big event every year. So we fast forward a little bit, and it was acknowledged, widely that the site wasn't being used and that something should be done to support it. Also, so that as survivors, were passing away, that it could be something that would educate, both third gen, fourth gen, and, in perpetuity, but also people who are not directly connected to this history. So enter the Philadelphia Holocaust Remembrance Foundation, which was formed in 2004 to figure out how to enhance and reactivate the site around this original monument and to promote increased public engagement and education. So there were multiple options explored, and it was a very lengthy process, which I think is proven by this didn't happen until 2018, and PHRF was formed in 2004. So super lengthy process, tons of stakeholders, as you can imagine, because we're on the Parkway. We are city property, we're a public park, but also we have these different groups that were involved with the original monument, both construction and petitioning for the site. So lots of stakeholders, and there were lots of disagreements about how the site should change, and it even should change. But even with all those discussions and plans and disagreements and eventually agreements, this is the plan that won out. So this is what our site currently looks like. I think it's great. I'm a big fan. So it's a plaza that has much more open space, as you can see, for seating and reflecting, but also for events. So we can have events in the central area and fit lots and lots of chairs, including socially distanced, which I'll show a picture in a little bit of a more recent event that we had that did go, we followed all the guidelines, and we were able to have about 70 people sitting in this area. So let's look at it. So I'm sorry, this is a picture from my phone, which is it's a little bit blurrier than I thought it would be, and I apologize. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the additional features that were added to the site. So in this picture, we're like standing in the center of the plaza, and the memorial is just hidden by this super alive tree, which is great. It's been very rainy here in Philadelphia. Everything is just growing out of control. So we're going to first wander over here to the 6 pillars. So the 6 pillars are meant to honor the memory of the 6 million Jews murdered. Of course, we know that there were many other victims representing many ethnic, religious, and otherwise targeted groups that were persecuted by the Nazis. But this 6 million also refers back to the monument, which we know is named for the Jewish martyrs. So with these pillars that you can see on the screen, you can see that there are 3. I'm only showing you 3, but there are 6 total pillars. And there's writing on the front and the back. So what I'm trying to do here is, this is the front or back, whatever you want to call it, of these 3. So the way that these work is they're presented in pairs, right, with writing on the front and the back, that are chronicling an atrocity of the Holocaust, or more generally, Nazi ideology. And then on the back of it, there's an American constitutional protection. So, for example, in this picture, we see human equality, the master race, and American democracy on one side, and then on the opposing is information about the death camps, liberation, and bearing witness. And the other pillars have information about totalitarianism, the Nuremberg laws, natural rights, freedom of religion, religious persecution, and protecting life and liberty. And the text for all of these are on our website, which I can drop links in towards the end. But I don't love during presentations when you're just reading through for a long time. So I will share that separately. So then we walk over to the opposing corner of the plaza, where there are train tracks from the railroad to the death camp Treblinka in Poland. So these are embedded in the pavement, and this recalls the industrial efficiency that defines the final solution. So to transport the maximum number of victims, Nazis crammed as many people as possible into train cars that were bound for sites of extermination or work camps. And once they arrived at, for these rails to Treblinka, but also we know these were taking victims to Auschwitz and to other camps. Families were split up, and many were immediately sent to their deaths in the gas chambers. So this, I think, was a pretty amazing artifact to have at the site, and it's kind of subtle. Like, I do think this is something that when people are walking by, it's not necessarily something they notice because it is just, steel or whatever it's made out of, but that's just embedded in the ground. So folks do have to read about it to find out, but I think it's a really impactful one, feature that's been added. But then on a slightly lighter note, and I think this is a story of kind of resilience and hope. This is that super verdant tree that we saw earlier that was blocking the memorial in the site, or in the picture we were looking at before. And this is the Terezin tree. So the Terezin tree, I'm going to give a whole bunch of information about this because I think this is an amazing story. So Terezin was a total anomaly amongst the camps. It was near Prague, and it functioned as a ghetto, a concentration camp, and a transit camp. And I'm sorry if any of this is redundant, but I figure just so we're all on the same page. So it had a lot of different functions. It also imprisoned very prominent cultural leaders and great minds and artists. So it kind of created this really active cultural community in the camp. Like there were, and it was forced, but people were presenting their music or creating, whatever their artwork was. There were kids that were imprisoned here that went to schools and were taught by, wonderful teachers who were also in prison. So there was, it's totally different than all of the other, camp experiences that we hear about. So it was also, obviously because of that, was used to mislead the public about how Hitler was treating those that were being persecuted and, imprisoned in these camps. So this was actually where the Red Cross came in June 1944 to kind of check up on what they had been hearing. And in preparation for that visit, the Nazis really disguised the conditions by, in order to portray a atmosphere of normalcy. So it included having prisoners plant gardens and paint the housing complexes and renovating barracks and planning for performances and other cultural events that would highlight those talents of the people that were imprisoned. And of course, again, in reality, it was meant to conceal the actual intentions of the final solution. So this tree comes from that camp. In 1943, a teacher that was imprisoned there enlisted the help of her students, who were also imprisoned, to plant a silver maple tree. I'm not sure how she got the maple tree. It might have been during these plans for the Red Cross coming and this kind of like beautification process. But the story goes that she taught the children this lesson, that even those who have very little can do very much, so that, they could take the energy that they had and, water this tree and, take care of this tree so that it could grow big and strong. And they did take care of it. The teacher ended up surviving the Holocaust, and she shared this story. And the original tree was destroyed by a flood after the war, but a bunch of cuttings had been taken. So this is one of the cuttings that was taken to preserve it. And they've been planted across the world. There are actually, you can see these little stakes that are in the ground. There are several of them. This one says Terezin because it is from Terezin, but these are the other places that the saplings have been planted. So there's one in San Francisco, there's one here in Philadelphia. I'm not remembering the other locations, but it's, again, there's information about where they all are on our website and a little bit more about the story.
And tentatively, we're supposed to get one in
Yeah.
Boise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that. I love this story too, Sophie. Like I put in the chat, there is a children's book called The Children's Tree of Terezin. And I read that for a recording that we're going to put on our website. So fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. It's gorgeous.
It's a beautiful story. And I did find out recently, it's I guess the garden where some of the other saplings are, which is where hopefully one will be transported over to Idaho, is like just out kind of closer to Lancaster, and somebody's taking care of them. And so we're hoping that they can go to a few other, Holocaust and human rights dedicated spaces. So, which would be amazing. Yeah, grow the family. So just to bring us back, zoom out from the site. So we looked at the 6 pillars right here, and here's our memorial. And this is our Trajan tree. And this right over here, and our the train tracks are right here in the corner. And then there's also this tree growth. So several of the trees that were planted to represent the woodlands that sheltered those who resisted the Nazis or hid from the Nazis. And then in this corner right here, you can see the little corner of it. There's a digital eternal flame. So it's like very eternal because it's digital. It can last literally forever. But we have an eternal flame to symbolize, hope and light, and embodying the commitment to never forget. So now we've got this beautiful space. This happened in 2018. It officially opened as this new space. We've got this new space that's ready to be used as a resource to teach people about the Holocaust. So what do we do with it? So it's only been open for 3 years now, and one of those years was in the pandemic. And we are very much still in the pandemic, but we have been able to start bringing people back to the site in very intentional, and thoughtfully planned ways. So while we have hosted a number of events and trainings, we're very excited to, moving forward, be hosting more. It's kind of exciting where I feel like we're still kind of in the beginning of seeing what we can really do and how we can utilize this space to the best of our abilities. So the most recent event, which is what these 2 pictures are from, was on May 10th, just a couple months ago, and it was called History is an Open Book, and it was commemorating the May 10th, 1933 book burnings. And so in this, let me see. Oh, no, not yet. In this event, we had elected officials and local students read from books and authors that had been banned by the Nazis, as well as current books, like you can see Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, at the forefront there, that write about social justice and identity and media literacy and creative expression. We have also partnered a lot with the Philadelphia School District and lots of private schools in the area to do professional developments with teachers. We've been developing lesson plans. I've only been in this position for about a year. And since I started this position, we've written 5 lesson plans. We've got another 2 that should be out by the end of the summer. So we're really ramping it up to get those done. And those all have a focus on intersectionality. So bringing in current topics, on the theme of, again, media literacy and social justice. And I think what we're really trying to do right now, especially when we can't bring as many people to the site over the last year, is create as many resources as possible so that this site can be used, whether virtually or in person, by teachers independent of us. So like we do offer tours at the site, and we do offer leading virtual tours at the site. But the hope is that teachers can also, go online and use our app and do it completely independently. So with that being said, I will show you. Here, we're going to share a different screen. This is always questionable. We're going to share my phone screen. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about iWalk. So this is our other way of utilizing the site. Okay, are we looking at my phone screen? Are we looking at my phone?
Let's see. We're still seeing the white page.
Okay.
It says iWalk screen share.
Okay,
Oh.
so I'll stop sharing this.
Okay.
And let's see what happens. There we go.
There we go.
All right, cool. Okay, so welcome to my phone. So, there we go. All right, so to bring 21st century learning to the memorial, we partnered with the USC Showa Foundation to develop and implement this app. So this is called iWalk. And the way that this program works is it connects physical locations, so those educational features that we looked at on the plaza, with personal memories and testimonies from Holocaust survivors and witnesses. And it's intended for online use and as a mobile app. And we've really focused on Philadelphia area survivors. So for Philadelphia school kids, they're hearing from people who, many of them are not around anymore, but that decided to come to Philadelphia after being liberated to make their home. And we're hoping that this is really a way to preserve those voices of those survivors for future generations in Philly and beyond, and can really extend the plaza's reach and impact beyond its physical location. So the app guides, here we're going to go to the United States, and we're going to go to, there's one in Miami now also, which is very cool. That's the one on top, the survivor's journey. And then the one below, you can see we have 3 tours here. So the app guides visitors as they move through the plaza and is giving them context and explanation of the interpretive elements. And visitors can use tablets or smartphones to view these clips. And there's also maps and photos and data from the ADL. So it's really multimodal, and it's also customizable based on the age of the visitors and their language preferences. So we're just going to go into it, and I'll show you very briefly what it looks like, and then we can kind of talk about it. So let's go into, let's do propaganda. So again, keep in mind there are the 3 lessons. There's one about contemporary anti-Semitism, one that's a general overview of the history of the Holocaust, and then this propaganda one. And like I said, multimodal approach. So with testimonies from survivors, videos, articles, photos. I will say we'll listen a little bit to one of the testimonies just to see how it supports the lesson. All of the people speaking are a bit older. Many of them have strong accents, so just turn up your volume if you find that might be helpful. All right, so here you see the plaza, and this Google view of the plaza. And what we're seeing at the bottom here, where you see the master race pillar, Nazi propaganda, is each chapter of the lesson is corresponding to a space on the plaza. So if students are at the plaza and they're doing this on their smartphone, their tablets, or whatever, the idea would be that for chapter 1, they're standing in front of the 6 pillars. But because it's all virtual, you can also kind of like walk around it, from wherever, like from Idaho. You can do it from anywhere you are. So the first stop, which is kind of like a chapter, has lots of historical information. But I think what makes it really accessible and something that's really nice for students is there's a built-in glossary. So by clicking on any of the underlined words, we get a glossary. And we also have a speech feature of it. So I can do listen to this segment, and let's see if you'll be able to hear it.
The master race in Nazi propaganda. Begin your I walk at the master race.
So I think that's a really nice feature as well, especially for students maybe who, reading is not their favorite thing to do for whatever reason. This is a really great way for them to still be able to get all of that information. And they can switch it up reading it or listening to it. So let's go through a little bit. So something that I've also really loved when we've done professional developments that are geared towards how to use the iWalk, which we can totally talk more in depth about the iWalk if that is of interest, but I know we're really focusing on the plaza space, is I think what's really wonderful is you're walking around the space, or you're kind of situated in the space virtually, and you have these other primary sources that you're pulling from. So having these kinds of images that you can zoom into, looking at different kinds of propaganda images, being able to ask students additional questions about what they're looking at, I just think is really fabulous. So then we have all these different testimonies. So I'm going to just play this one. It's not very long, but so that you hear how this, again, is really supporting the lesson.
As the years went by, like in 1934, there was a terrible paper being published. It was called the Stürmerzeitung, Stormtrooper newspaper. Everything seemed to be stormtroopers, troopers. And that was a horrible paper. That affected me terribly because it was, it had all kinds, it was plastered on all these stores that sold newspapers. And in the morning, going to school, I would see this Stürmerzeitung and people standing and reading them. And what did they list in this Stürmerzeitung? They had people's faces with long noses and saliva running from their mouth and looking at, of course, typically, you know, they meant Jewish people because they always wrote about Jewish people with their long noses. And they were looking at little Gentile children, greedily looking at the money that the children had in their hands, like they wanted to steal the money from these children. And they had terrible stories in there that Jewish doctors trying to inject Gentiles with poisonous medication. They had bankers that would swindle Jews out of their money. And here I was walking to school, and people were actually reading this, and young people, old people, of all ages. And by the time I got to school, I couldn't learn.
So these pull from the 54,000 eyewitness accounts that are in USC Showa's, archives. So the clips that are embedded are drawn from those testimonies. It's called their USC Showa Foundation's Visual History Archive. And our app is complemented by a page on the USC Showa Foundation's educational website, Eyewitness. And it has curated content that supports this project and links to other Holocaust educational programming, both from USC Showa and other programs within the Philadelphia region. And then I think a really fabulous feature, this is just some information about the interviewee. There's always information. Ooh. And here, I just have to highlight this. Whenever we do the PDs, this is one of the ones that I highlight for additional questions that can be asked of students to really think about, like, what are we seeing in this image that tells us that it's propaganda? What are the details that we can pull out that we're like, this is propaganda, which we don't have to do, but it's, I think, a really good example of it. So when we go through, I'm going to keep going through information. There are questions throughout where students can answer them. So if teachers are doing this virtually, where they're sharing their screen, almost like what I'm doing with all of you, students can answer through a Google Doc, or they can answer in the chat, or they can just unmute themselves and answer. But the other option is that students can get a classroom code. So teachers would register through that eyewitness page with USC Showa, get a classroom code. The students get it as well. And then when the students input their answers, the teacher will get it. So it's a really nice way for students and teachers to be linked within this app and in the lesson. And students can also dictate, which I think is also super helpful. So
Sophie, I'm just gonna, I just want to acknowledge Dwayne's comment here. This facet of learning and hearing from the survivors firsthand while you're standing in the plaza. Like, this is amazing. I posted the website for Eyewitness. It is free to join, and teachers can build lessons on it and assign things, and it can be as elaborate or as simple as you want to make it, but you can include all of the corresponding testimony that Sophie is showing us right now. They just happen to be connected. Their memorial is connected to the archives. So this is extraordinary. I just thank you for, walking us through this, because
sure.
it's just, I can't, just shy of being in these locations, in Poland or Germany. This is, I think, a great supplement to any lesson about the Holocaust.
Oh yeah, I think especially for the unique type of museum and educational organization that we are. So we don't have a collection,
right? Because
we're an open air public space,
right.
And our office is tiny and just 2 people. So we don't have a collection. We also don't have a ton of capacity to do, if we got tons and tons of tours, there are only 2 of us that can do that, that can lead them. And you can probably fit 2 classes on the plaza at once, and they're going to be hearing each other while they do their work. So I think what this offers is again, like, totally, it's free, and you have to have, I realize accessibility factor wise, you do need to have some sort of smart device.
Right.
But as long as there's a smart device, we have internet at the site, we have, this can be downloaded very quickly, and that it can be done from the classroom or the outdoor classroom at the plaza. And I think what's also really great is that because this is so much of our collection is online, the things that we're pulling from USC Showa and from the ADL and from the Holocaust Memorial Museum in DC. Since that's all virtual, it can also be updated fairly easily. I mean, we're very much in touch with USC Showa to update things as they come up. So we're working on having all of our tours be multilingual. Currently, they're in English and Spanish, but we'd like it to be in many more languages, especially in Philadelphia, where there are many, many languages that are being spoken. And they're being updated with new testimony. So one of these, it'll probably take me longer to find than just to tell you, but one of these has been updated to have the testimony of a survivor who is a congregant at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. And it was just, by chance that he didn't end up being at the synagogue during the shooting a few years back. So it is being updated so that we're thinking about very contemporary anti-Semitism and very contemporary attacks. We're thinking about graffiti that's been seen, near Penn's campus, very close by. I keep pointing towards the memorial. It's over there.
Yeah.
So,
we definitely know a thing or two about vandalism on a memorial.
yeah. And when we go through that, I walk with teachers, I will usually reference, if we're going through that specific storyline, we talk about that this is a super relevant and current topic. And we talk about the Wassmuth Center's sticker vandalism recently, and the t-shirts that we're seeing at the January 6th Capitol insurrection. So it's, I think these are ways for Holocaust education to not be completely based in this is something that happened and we're looking at the
Yes.
history
Yeah.
but how can we learn from that history and think about how, what are the through lines to now, whether it's, anti-Semitism that we're seeing, or Islamophobia, or anti-Black, racism, or
Right.
anti anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here, I will actually stop sharing my screen. Here we go, since we're chatting now.
Yeah.
But I think, and that's kind of the overall of what I wanted to share. So I'll pause here because I've been talking for a while, and I can answer questions. And I really did focus on the space and how we use it and iWalk, but I'm happy to talk about our lesson plans or the plaza or the history or whatever questions might exist.
Yeah, Karen, go ahead.
Question. I was looking at the and now English is failing me. The statue. And I was wondering about the art symbolism in it, because that is an absolutely important and crucial aspect of art. And I have yet to find a good website that gives me like a 360. I saw there's a Torah scroll, there's the Shin hand symbol, but there's also, bodies being crushed down and hands reaching up. And so I it's like everyone takes picture from the same direction. And could you recommend a website that explains every aspect, or could you give us a rundown of what you know as the symbolism, or I can build it in?
Sure. I'm gonna, on my other screen, I'm gonna bring up, we have an organization called the Association for Public Art, which I imagine that exists probably in every city. But we are on, I'm gonna Google it and see if I can find, we are on their site, not for the plaza, but for the sculpture. And there's an audio, and it's a great kind of DIY art walk that you can do all, like really anywhere in the city, but they highlight the Benjamin Franklin Parkway because there are so many artworks along it. And they do talk about this specific sculpture. So let me see.
I always tell Sophie that the sculpture reminds me of the one in Poland, the Ghetto, the Warsaw Ghetto Memorial. That huge, just, I mean, I wonder if there's any relation to it, because it's always reminded me of that. I don't know.
Which I actually, unfortunately, I don't know as much about the art history of this sculpture, and that's very surprising to me because I mostly do art history before this. So I'm looking for this site because I can just drop it into the chat. But I mean, I can say it's a very intense sculpture, and as you've seen from some of those images, it is a lot of the people that are in it are definitely have faces of struggle and pain, and that it does kind of look like this like tornado of bodies. So it's very intense. And it looked very intense when it was just the memorial, and then trees, these, very large planters that were very heavy and dark stone, and all this coverage. It was, I think the way that the memorial is now, hopefully the plaza can give a little bit more light to it, like literally and figuratively, so that it can actually be looked at as, as the artwork that it is, and actually be seen and not just kind of scary in the shadows.
I actually found an interesting view of it. Like you said, Sophie, it's on the Association for Public Art website. Yeah. Nathan Rappaport was the artist. And I'm with Karen. I'm wondering why, let's see. Sophie, do you mind if I jump in the screen share on this image?
Please.
Okay,
Please. And I'm going to drop that link in the chat as well.
perfect. I love the hands in this view.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is amazing. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so this is in that that link that I just dropped into the chat for the Association for Public Art.org website.
And there is you might have seen when we scrolled down by, but there is that 4-minute little
Yes.
audio clip about the artwork.
Yes, yes. Fascinating.
I'm sorry I don't have more of an answer for that. Something that I want to learn more about for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's, I just made a connection actually, the link that Leslie provided has a description. In the flames of a burning bush, an anguished or dying mother reclines, and above her wailing child throws out its arms. A man raises his hands in prayer while another pair of hands holds the Torah scrolls. Near the top, fists clutch daggers, symbols of resistance. At the apex, the flames become the blazing candles of a menorah. And I was doing a little research on we all recognize this perhaps as the Live Long and Prosper, but it's Shin
Yes.
as a blessing. And so in the midst, I've just found it interesting and significant that in the midst of this rather torturous statement, there's still a blessing outward toward the world.
Mhm.
So this is very interesting. Thank you for presenting on this today.
Sure. And there's also, you can't really see, but I feel like to add on to that, I think it's an interesting way that it's been used since 1964, like regardless of all this, like take away all of this, the actual memorial, you can see, oh, you're not looking at my screen. Sorry. One sec.
And Karen, you're the expert. I mean, do you at the base, so underneath where the shin arms are, do those look like Hebrew letters to you? They just kind of remind me of Hebrew letters.
And I haven't.
I'm looking for the picture you're looking at.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Let's see. One moment. I'm sorry, Sophie.
Oh no.
Here it is. So I'm looking right there.
Oh, okay. I am not an expert in Hebrew. I don't see them, but I wouldn't say that in that they're not there. I'd have to look at it much more closely. But it looks like there's a repetition of 3, which could be significant.
Well, and I was gonna say.
Oh, it's a head covering with the decoration. It's the ribbon decoration.
Oh, yeah, I see it now.
Yeah.
Okay, where are we looking? Sorry.
Okay, let's see, Sophie. Hang on one second. Right, there's the face. And then there's a head covering, and it looks.
Oh yeah, he's got his tallis and and his tefillin.
Tefillin, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't see that up until now, but I think it's, Karen, you just reminded me. I think the number 6 too is really significant in all of your plaza, because you guys have 6 major components to your monument. And on the top of your menorah up here are 6 with no shamash to light them. Usually a menorah is, 3 on one side, 3 on the other, with the single candle in the center. That center candle is used to light the others on Hanukkah. And maybe it's the angle that I'm looking at, but there appears to be no. We always say, and this was when I was working with the little kiddos, is to be a shamash, because the shamash is the light. Bring the light and light the other candles.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to, like right after this, I'm gonna go back down and just do like a dive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And it is an amazing, like it's huge and it is so
Yeah.
complex. And I wanted to, can I point out one more thing?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I didn't even think of this, but I think since we're really
Oh,
looking
yes.
at the memorial,
Yeah.
something that I also think is a really beautiful use that has kind of come about is, there is a tradition at Jewish cemeteries to put, if you visit a grave, to put a stone
Yes.
on top of the headstone. And that has happened here. It's almost become like a symbolic headstone. And so there are tons of, you can kind of see it in this picture, there are tons of rocks that are placed on it. And beneath the actual sculpture on the base are the names of, they're not all spelled totally right, and there are missing titles, but because it's a historic work of art, we're not looking to change it. But there are the names of the camps and some of the organizations that were involved in putting the memorial here. But I think because it has the names of the camps, it's been seen as this space for survivors to come and also place their stones as a reflection.
I'm always moved when I go out to the statue of Anne Frank and I see stones on the wall, because I know that Jewish people have come to consider that a point of remembrance, a symbolic, like you said, a symbolic gravesite, like someplace tangible where they can go and remember. And the significance of the stone for my Christian or just non-Jewish friends is that it is more permanent than a flower. A flower dies, a flower is not forever. But if you go to Auschwitz or you go to the camps, you go to the ghettos, you see that stones are placed to memorialize various locations and on headstones as well.
Yeah. And I was just typing
Yeah.
Dwayne's question, but I can just answer. So the question of, are the rocks collected and stored somewhere, kind of as like a
great question.
The symbolism that they've been given. We don't collect them, but also traditionally at cemeteries, it's like they get knocked off, or it's the stone is not necessarily, I think, imbued with the meaning as much as the placement of it, like the action of placing it there. So it can even be somebody can go up, take one off, and put it back on. So it's I think if people were putting objects, which I don't think has happened, but if people were putting objects that were that the object had the meaning, like maybe it was an artifact of somebody's grandparent that's a survivor, or somebody that died in the Holocaust, then we would certainly take that and put it somewhere very, very safe. But the rocks, I'm guessing most of them actually came out of the planters on the at the memorial. So,
yes.
Yeah. So we love to see that engagement with it. But yeah, we don't save them. But that's a great question. Thank you for asking.
I'd like to build on that. Actually, there's two current phenomena that I've observed or that are emerging in the newspapers. The first one is the rock painting hobby that people really kind of got into during the pandemic, like take a rock, leave a rock, and be present. And then rock stacking. There's apparently a controversy about rock stacking.
Yeah, the cairn.
But I find it interesting that the representation of stones and as symbols of someone's passage in one way or another, remembering itself. Do you see painted stones showing up at the memorial or stacked or anything like that?
We haven't. Stacking wise, we also haven't. It's kind of a consistent, like there's one layer. Yeah, I would love to see. I feel like it would be really sweet and like heartwarming to see some of the painted stones being there. But I haven't seen that. And the cairns, I really haven't seen outside of like park areas, more like nature engagement park areas. So, but that's a great question. I'll keep my eye out.
Yeah.
I go pretty much every day to check on.
Oh, yeah.
So,
As do I
yeah.
you know, to visit Anne or to have lunch with Anne. My husband always, chuckles at me, but it's, it's really, it's nice to be in an outdoor, space where you have this, like you have so many elements, to reflect on out there. And Dwayne and I were chatting about the grove. I love that component. I really do. I never knew what that, the row of trees stood for, but that is really beautiful. I just wanted to clarify some Jewish 101 about, a menorah versus a Hanukkah. The menorah is actually for the week. So you have, the week, and then Shabbat is the last day. Yeah, there was a difference. Okay, yeah. And then the Hanukkah, you'll notice, has a lot of prongs. So the 8 days and nights for Hanukkah and the Shamash to light. And Dwayne has a question. Why are there no images on nearby wall spaces?
Oh, great question. One thing I would be curious, and I'm totally up to talking about this, like what images we would maybe put, like would it be putting maybe on the 6 pillars some historic images, I imagine from like USHMM, from their archive, but on the wall, the big wall, is it helpful if I share my screen again to do this?
Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely.
Let's visit the memorial and we'll take a look. Okay, so on here, you can kind of see it probably on your screen. This is it's a big donor wall. So there aren't any images on here because they're all engraved with our donors. We also have pavers along here, and in the central section, donors can give a nice donation and have pavers made for their families. But that's an interesting idea. Like I'm guessing right in, like kind of in here, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, this is Dwayne. So I'm wondering, because where the tree grove is, you have that huge wall back there, which would be like a huge center point or focus point or focal point. And I'm sure that doesn't belong to the actual memorial site, and it's probably a business. Maybe that's part of the reason there's nothing there. But I'm just like, why not use the space that's available in terms of grabbing attention on this huge canvas?
Gotcha. Thank you. So the wall, that's great. This is actually something that we've been talking a lot about, trying to figure out if we have any ability to use this wall. So this building is owned by Verizon, and it is historically, it's on the register of historic spaces. So there is chatter about it. Like we would love, at the foundation, we would love to either put a mural, like working with Mural Arts, which is a huge, amazing organization in Philly that works to put tons of murals all over the city. We would love to do that. We would love to do maybe a temporary installation, but as you already said, because we don't own it, and especially because it's on the historic register, there's some hurdles to get over. But we are actually chatting about it because we would love it. It's just, is it possible? TBD.
We face similar, obstacles at the Wassmuth Center, just being a public park, there's a lot we would like to do, but, that park belongs to everybody. You know, it's public and anybody can come there. And like you said, no tickets, no money, no admission. You know, we want to keep it beautiful. Just have to negotiate, right?
Yeah, and we're luckily there are so many parks right around us. Like just across the street is Love Park, where the big what's his name? Robert Indiana, Love famous sculpture is, and there's a couple across the street in other directions. And so we do get, like, people generally are very respectful of keeping it clean. And, you know, it's an interesting relationship between us and the city, because it is a city park, but we maintain it. And we pay to maintain it and have the ability to talk, you know, we talk to the city about permits when permits come across to use the space. So it's an interesting navigation, but everyone's on the same page, which
Yeah.
And I see Dwayne is raising his hand. Thank you.
So I do have a question regarding the foundation. I know that this is specifically about the plaza, and the plaza is an open public space, and your office is, you know, around the corner somewhere. Are there future plans for doing more than just having that plaza? Are there plans to do like a resource center or a museum or some kind of library or learning space?
So as of right now, no. Not because it's not of interest to us, but I think because there are organizations in Philadelphia that are doing really great work in those spaces. So like there is the National Museum of American Jewish History that's just down the street, very close to like the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall. And they're currently still closed to the public, but they're doing amazing programs, and they have a fantastic collection. And it is very much more so geared towards, it is the American Jewish experience. So even when they get into Holocaust education, it's talking about what's the American, you know, soldiers' experience and the US's involvement in the war, and then a lot about survivors coming to the States and what that looked like. So they are great at that. And then because we have so many universities right around, the University of Pennsylvania has a pretty, you know, astounding collection both of Philadelphia Jewish texts, you know, like libraries that really cover everything that we could possibly want. So while I personally would love if we were trying to start a collection, just because that's something that I would love to be working on as well. We have really good partnerships with other organizations that are doing that work really beautifully. So I think it's relying on everybody's expertise is working well for all these different organizations.
Yeah, I was gonna just say, Sophie and I, our respective organizations are part of this partnership with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. So, you know, she and I, you know, have given breakout rooms, you know, on behalf of the USHMM. You know, we attend these monthly meetings with the USHMM just to kind of stay in the know of what, you know, where their research is taking them, and kind of, you know, what is the latest, what should we know about the museum, exhibits, and so forth. I think it's worth mentioning too, as a teaser, that Ken Burns, the documentarian, is currently at work on a 6-part series called America and the Holocaust. So it's going to be purely about, you know, the American experience, as Sophie was talking about. Yeah, Roosevelt, Stephen Wise, all the major players, that if you had any questions about why, the United States didn't bomb the camps, I'm sure Ken Burns will provide some kind of answer to that. And I know Dr. Michael Berenbaum speaks a lot about that too, and he's probably helping with that project. So Karen, thank you for the research on Nathan Rappaport. I knew that architecture and that design looked familiar because this is the monument to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising that I saw in Poland, in the center of Warsaw. So it's this, like you said, Sophie, so beautifully, this like tornado, this like mesh of human beings, being depicted. And, what that person in the center, we did a little analysis when we were there with my own students, what that person might represent or what the people around him might represent. So thank you so much for looking that up. Dwayne, do you still have a question?
I see a question in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
About the partnerships that we have.
Yeah.
So I think in many ways, in very different ways, we can take advantage of some of them. So like for us, we have a really strong relationship to the school district. So our professional development, no worries, good. You're good. The relationship with the school district has opened a lot of doors to really getting in touch with tons of teachers in the Philadelphia area. So we are kind of the organization that's doing a lot of the Holocaust education PDs. And like we live there in that kind of space and creating lesson plans and working with teachers and the curriculum office with the school district. Penn has been definitely a great resource for if we're doing research on something, getting in touch with them to say, we're trying to do X, Y, and Z, and then they give us tons of resources to look at. There's another organization in the city that is called HAMMOck. It's the Holocaust Awareness Museum and Education Center. It's a very small museum. I don't think they're actively collecting, but they do have a small collection that's in the suburbs. And they are kind of the conduit to the survivors in the area that are still actively speaking to students. So that's not from us, but we'll get teachers that'll get in touch with us saying that they want to, have a survivor, join their class, and we'll connect them to them. So I think it's a, we are always learning what everybody has and what we have that we can offer, but everyone's pretty up to talking about, how we can all help each other out. And I'll even add, we had, because I think it's really cool, and I feel like this group would think it's really cool. We recently had a donor get in touch because she has a book from 1935, the propaganda book about Hitler. And she was like, I don't know what to do with it. I think it's haunted and I need it out of my house. And so she gave it to us, and we've been working, and the Wassmuth Center might take it, but we've been working to learn more about it, and it's just fascinating. It's also not in great shape, but it's just this whole book that's filled with pictures and information about why, Hitler is the best person, like as both a father figure of Germany, as a war hero, as a you name it. It's about he's a great artist. It's an amazing find.
Sophie, who's the author?
Well, this was one of the it's called a cigarette book. It was produced by a cigarette company.
Okay, right. That's right. You told me that. Yeah,
but Penn, it was Penn that gave us all of the information about where to look, who to talk to, and it's fascinating. But these are kind of the ways that we try and work together to be like, we got this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sophie, indirectly, Sophie contacted me about this, and my background is also in museum education. So of course, I want to put this in a temperature controlled display, in the new building. And I just spoke to somebody at our local synagogue here in Boise, and turns out they have quite the artifact collection as well. And they go, do you know anywhere where we can put these on display, or anybody who would want this? And they had no idea that our building is breaking ground in October. So this might be a great, way. And Dwayne, this is how it happens. We just kind of talk, we discuss what we have, we discuss what we're doing. And, because Sophie's not only a colleague, she's a friend, and I still have, friends in San Francisco and Los Angeles that I have worked with, and, am willing to share with all of you, obviously. But I'm thrilled that her organization, my organization, and we have a third partner in Wisconsin that Dan Helmschild was talking about yesterday. We, try to utilize these contacts and get to the teachers who need this information, who want this information. Yeah, Karen, go ahead.
I was just wondering about, I don't remember the person's name. I want to say it's Jessica, but it could be Jennifer. But it's Boise State, our new building. Leslie, I know you're in Boise with me. On Capitol, the big building that looks kind of like the Jawa sand hauler. That the woman who is the director of the Art Display Center, her specialty is like books and book preservation and history, and she's amazing, and she might be an absolute resource, and I just don't remember her name right now. But we also have the Center for the Book on Boise State campus as well, so there may be some people there who could store or preserve or inform. I don't know if you're talking to Boise State on that, but
that would be amazing. No, that would be amazing. I'm open to that, Karen. That's a wonderful idea. Yeah.
I'll go look for her name and I'll send it to you.
Please do.
Who she is.
Yeah, please do. That would be amazing. I'm not, trained in artifact or preservation. So that would be a great resource.
Cool. Oh, and our special collections, we have some really impressive people who know a lot of stuff about a lot of things in our Albertsons Library special collections. I recommend Alex, but Cheryl, I'm sorry, I'm really bad with names today. I should remember these people's names, but they are amazing, and they also would be a resource. They've got our oldest printed version of any book, the Historia Scholastica, housed in our library, and so they're very aware of, like, it's falling apart too, so they know these things.
Yeah, I love your comment, Dwayne. This also speaks to the importance of archives, resources and artifacts. Yeah, those spaces are vital but expensive. Yes.
Which is also why I think to the earlier question about if we might be expanding. Currently, we have a very manageable budget because it's 2 people on staff full time, but it's an open air space, so we're not paying for our we have an electric bill, and we have our our maintenance, and we've got the internet, but otherwise our costs are fairly low, and I think being able to create something where we can maintain it in perpetuity is of such importance that trying to expand before we can have total security of the site is just not it's not priority yet, but maybe in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for answering my questions, and coming back to things that we think are not important, but they absolutely are. And for that forward thinking, between you and your colleague and others that are stakeholders in all this, I mean, it's important because, we talk about holding things in perpetuity, especially with relation to yesterday's conversation about how things can be easily forgotten or erased in some way, shape, or form, either on purpose or accidentally, or a combination of those things. This is really important about, having that financial stability to ensure that these things are long lasting and meaningful into the future. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. it's, you know, especially in this day and age, like in the in this iteration of our COVID time, seeing how nonprofits are needing to either adjust budgets or how we've adjusted budgets. It feels good that we have some stability and that we can do what we need to do right now, but it's more of a how do we make sure that we can keep doing that.
And I'm sure, like, you know, something Joyne also said, I'm sure Sophie and I could run a whole session about this little niche, but the artifacts, and especially Nazi artifacts, Nazi, you know, symbols, propaganda. I mean, okay, propaganda, yes, we would, you know, absolutely include in, you know, a Holocaust museum or, you know, relating to the Jewish experience, but you know, things with the Iron Cross or the swastika or, you know, Nazi paraphernalia. It was interesting when I was in San Francisco, and it's usually either one or the other. You know, either you house archives and you have this temperature controlled room, or you have a center like a memorial and an education center. And in San Francisco, we had the small room of temperature controlled archives. And my first week of working there, my mentor came and visited me and was taking a look around. And, you know, our curator was saying, you know, well, we have some Nazi paraphernalia. What do we do with that? And he said, it's your responsibility to preserve the Jewish experience, you know, the artifacts that absolutely, you know, relate and correspond to the Holocaust and Jewish life and Jewish persecution. However, you know, if that Nazi paraphernalia gets into the wrong hands, we have a problem. And so he was saying, you know, it's not your responsibility to preserve those Nazi artifacts. You can keep them, you can, you know, display them and talk about why, you know, they're educational and significant in that respect, but it's not our job to preserve them. I thought that was very interesting. Yeah. So, yeah.
And that also, that speaks to like this question about the book that I showed.
Yes.
That when I was learning about it, there were many of them that were destroyed because this is something that there were lots of copies of.
Right.
And I'm trying to look and see the information about it, but it was I can't find it quickly enough, but it was a lot of them were destroyed because it was this is a horrible, horrible thing. But then of course it's also you know, I think so important for educational purposes, you know, to see how, like in this case, how Hitler was, you know, portrayed, you know, by corporations, like how a cigarette company was involved in the propaganda.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. So, and even how this donor got it was like her grandmother went to the 1936 Olympics and ended up coming home with it.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Not to preserve it. And you know, I push back on that, but
yeah, I know. I do as well. You know, I think it's important that we, you know, study every aspect, you know, because we're so thorough with Holocaust education and with, you know, this teaching of it. You know, when I reference that Hugo Boss, you know, designed the Nazi uniforms, I'm not just going to tell my students, I want to show them, you know, because that's an example of, you know, this, and Karen said this yesterday, this greater idea of Nazi Germany and what that meant, and to have, you know, a designer be so particular about these uniforms. It wasn't just any other army, you know, and the SS wasn't just any other, you know, militia, or it wasn't the Wehrmacht. It was something elite. It was a status. So I think, you know, to convey those kind of, you know, messages or lessons, you know, I think those need to be preserved as well. But Michael, you can disagree with me on that.
I just want to also,
Yeah.
Dwayne just put in the chat, I'm not familiar with Knowledge River, but I am Googling it right now. And I love talking to people, and thank you for, and if you know people there and want to.
Yeah, so basically Knowledge River is a school within a school, if you want to consider it that, at the University of Arizona, where initially they were focusing on Hispanic, Latino, and Native American graduate students who were interested in working in libraries, archives, museums, and basically building librarians for those spaces, and infusing more of us in those particular areas, whether it's a research-based or an academic-based setting, or something that, you know, that serves the public in other ways. But I think, and one of the things that, and I am a graduate of the program, and I think one of the things that was of value was having internships in different places and spaces. And when I was a student, I never heard of opportunities with a library research center or archive specific to the Holocaust. And I think it would be valuable, so valuable, to have, you know, a person of color placed in one of those places to help, you know, their learning, but also to help the general public and the world.
Oh, totally agree, 100%. We just started, and this is so, like, it's just in its beginning, but we've started what we're calling our Scholar in Residence program, which we've only had one Scholar in Residence who is fabulous, and is an amazing addition to the team, because this is somebody who was in the cohort below me at Brown, so we do know each other, and what we'd like to do in the future is, you know, have it be students that we don't know directly, but from probably Philadelphia region. But her focus and expertise is on American involvement in and general history of Latin American dictatorships. And she's Dominican and talks a lot about, and has been kind of putting both her family experience and her, you know, her lived expertise and her scholarly expertise into our lesson plans to really broaden. Like, we're doing one on immigration right now, and she's doing a lot about the Jewish immigrants who came to Latin America. And it's been so important and so great, as, you know, my boss and I are both third generation, you know, we're the granddaughters of survivors, but also as, you know, white American women who are Jewish, we represent very much, you know, we have different experiences, but our own viewpoints. So that, and I'm going to look into this program, because I would love, as long as we're doing virtual, creating more opportunities to have students at least doing research with us. We're such a small non-archive having organization, but yeah, just have those research opportunities. Yeah, would be great. And it's paid. We had to make sure that it was a paid internship. We are not doing unpaid internships.
It's so important. Yes. Sophie, do you want to drop your email in the chat? So yeah, I'm just thinking of all of our participants who will be watching this later, and who will want to contact you.
Yeah, please contact me. I love chatting more. Like, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have, you know, constructive criticism, I'll take it all.
No, I can't wait to visit Philadelphia and see the plaza. I mean,
Anytime.
yeah. What an amazing use of that space. And in the last half hour, if there are no more questions, I just kind of want to encourage you all to journal or write about, you know, your reactions, what you think of the Philadelphia Remembrance Plaza, and what is remembrance versus memorialization. So Friday, you know, we do call our space the Idaho Anne Frank Human Rights Memorial. So kind of think about that, you know, as we get to the latter part of the week. And Sophie, I just want to thank you so much for that tremendous tour that you gave us of the plaza. And yeah, I'm inspired. The railroad tracks, I just got chills. That's, I had no idea that you housed that in your space. And that's, yeah.
Yeah, it makes it a pretty, I think it was impactful to me before the redesign, just because of my personal, you know, history. But
Yeah.
but I think with some of those artifacts and those features, it's just such a, I think it can stand on its own better. People walking through the space can learn, but it's yeah, it's very impactful.
Yes.
Not with other words, but
yes. No, I love how you mentioned that it's very inconspicuous. You know, those who walk by it, you know, won't necessarily know. It's not like a cattle car in the middle, you know, of, you know, and New York had that exhibition and it was wonderful and powerful. But if you know, happen upon those tracks, I mean, I can just imagine how people would react to seeing something like that. So it's, yeah, what a great addition to that plaza. Yeah, Dwayne, really quick, yeah, you said that those were from Treblinka, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and how did you get those?
So I realized I did it in a private message. I'm not positive. I'll read it to the rest of you. I'm not positive. It might be on our website, in the, you know, features of the plaza, information about the train tracks. But I'm not sure, and I definitely want to look into it because I am curious.
Yeah, yeah.
What I'm guessing is that from whatever the organization is that does the preservation for Treblinka or like whatever that umbrella organization is, that they donated it to us. Yeah. And that we gave them something.
Amazing.
But there was some sort of in-kind.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you again so much. And I am just so anxious to get you here in Boise, especially when we open the new building. So yeah.
Idaho. Beautiful, beautiful place.
Yes, yes. So just an update and a reminder, tomorrow there is going to be no live session. I will send you tomorrow's webinar to watch at your convenience. Lisa and I will be with the kiddos in the morning tomorrow for our summer reading program at the Anne Frank Memorial. But Friday, we will continue at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. And that will be our final day where we will be discussing memorialization and what that entails, and hopefully the virtual tour that Dan is going to be recording of our memorial, the Wassmuth Center for Human Rights and the Idaho Anne Frank Human Rights Memorial. So thank you all so much. These sessions, yeah, I thank you, Dwayne. I'm learning so much from all of you, and this is probably one of the best cohorts I've ever had the pleasure of being a part of, and that includes San Francisco and LA. I mean, I don't know what it was about this course, but you know, quality over quantity. And you know, Dan Helmschild was so grateful. You know, and Karen, I emailed you about Margot's Latin lessons. You know, Aaron Peterer says, you know, if you have any questions about the hiding place or, you know, Anne's life in general, please, you know, contact me. I'll contact him, hoping to bring him to Boise too. So take care, everyone. Have a wonderful day today and tomorrow, and I'll see you on Friday. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, everyone. This is so fun.
Take care. See you soon.
Bye-bye.